Harold Shipman was born in 1946 in the English town of Nottingham. At the tender age of 17, he experienced an event that would leave a lasting mark on his life, the passing of his cherished mother due to lung cancer. As she navigated through the turbulent final stages of her life, she was prescribed morphine by her doctor, a powerful drug that alleviated her suffering and seemed to suspend the harsh reality of her impending end. A young Shipman watched, captivated as his mother appeared to transcend her physical pain, her awareness of her impending death seemingly erased under the potent influence of the drug. It was these moments that planted the seeds of inspiration within him, fueling a desire to hold the power of life and death in his own hands. It served as his motivation to pursue a career in medicine. Fresh out of school, Shipman found himself immersed in the world of patient care as a general practitioner. However, his initiation into the medical field was far from smooth. Within just a year of his medical career, he stumbled into his first brush with the law. Shipman was caught red-handed forging prescriptions for pethidine, a potent opioid known not only for its pain-relieving properties, but also its potential as a recreational drug. It appeared that Shipman had intended the pethidine for personal use. His transgression, being his first offense, was dealt with leniently. He was required to pay a minimal fine and attend a drug rehabilitation program. Once completed, he was free to resume his role as a doctor. This incident, however, shone a spotlight on a troubling pattern: Shipman's infatuation with pain-killing narcotics. It marked a dangerous interplay between his professional role and personal addiction, a haunting foreshadowing of the sinister path he would later tread. After his initial stumble involving the forged prescriptions, Harold Shipman seemingly navigated onto a path of redemption. No further transgressions stained his record, and instead he emerged as a revered figure within his community. Even the local media took notice of his work, featuring him in a news program where he expounded on the nuances of mental health treatments. Dr. Shipman garnered a reputation as the epitome of diligence and care, a physician who not only tended to his patients within the confines of his practice, but went above and beyond to ensure their well-being. He became a familiar and welcomed sight, frequently making home visits to monitor his elderly patients. To the people around him, he embodied a doctor's ideals: compassionate, dedicated, and above all trustworthy. In 1998, an ominous cloud began to form over Shipman's pristine image. Linda Reynolds, a fellow doctor at the hospital where Shipman worked, was the first to voice her apprehensions. She pointed to a disquieting pattern, an unusually high number of deaths among Shipman's elderly patients. It was a truth that couldn't be contested. Hundreds of Shipman's patients had indeed met their end while under his care. Shipman was adept at explaining away these mortalities. He would inform the coroner time and time again that these were deaths simply brought on by the natural course of aging. Yet with Reynolds' mounting concerns now in the open, the local authorities felt compelled to look into the matter. 2 police officers were assigned to investigate Shipman, yet their inexperience proved to be a critical impediment. After merely 3 weeks, they closed the investigation, having unearthed no evidence of wrongdoing. As far as they could tell, all of the patients had died of natural causes. In the coming months, new evidence would come to light. The harbinger of this chilling truth came in the unlikeliest of forms: a local taxi driver named John Shaw. Many of Shipman's elderly patients, being unable to drive themselves, regularly enlisted Shaw's services to transport them to and from their appointments with Shipman. Over time, Shaw had come to know these passengers, their stories, and their health conditions. A disquieting pattern began to emerge in his recollections. Shaw noted a troubling correlation between the health of his regular passengers and their visits to Dr. Shipman. Initially, these passengers appeared reasonably healthy, at least for their age. However, following their appointments with Shipman, their health seemed to plummet rapidly. What's more, an alarming number of these passengers met untimely ends, their lives cut short in what seemed like a mercilessly repeating cycle. In total, Shaw recalled 21 specific passengers whose stories mirrored this grim narrative. The anecdotal evidence, when viewed through his lens, was troubling hinting at a darker reality beneath the everyday comings and goings of Dr. Shipman's practice. September 1998 marked the beginning of the end for Harold Shipman's reign of terror. The linchpin in his downfall came not from the extensive number of deaths that trailed behind him, but from the suspicious circumstances surrounding just one patient, Kathleen Grundy. Like so many before her, Kathleen Grundy, an elderly woman under Shipman's care, passed away quietly in the confines of her home. To become routine, Shipman penned the cause of her death as the inevitabilities of old age. But this case would prove to be anything but routine. Angela Woodruff, Grundy's daughter, soon discovered something deeply amiss in the wake of her mother's passing. As she went through the legal formalities, she came across Grundy's will, and its contents were nothing short of shocking. Instead of passing on her estate to her family, as one might expect, the will outlined a generous gift. Almost the entirety of Grundy's life savings, amounting to £386,000, was bequeathed to none other than Dr. Harold Shipman. This stark anomaly set off immediate alarm bells. The will not only felt out of character for Kathleen Grundy, but also brought into sharp focus the inconceivable possibility of Shipman's ulterior motives. Faced with the alarming revelations in her mother's will, Angela Woodruff turned to the police. The authorities, now spurred into action, proceeded to conduct a post-mortem examination on Grundy's body. They almost immediately found traces of diamorphine, the clinical term for medical-grade heroin. This finding was deeply perplexing, for Grundy had neither a prescription for diamorphine nor a medical condition warranting its use. This powerful and often deadly drug had somehow found its way into her system. When confronted with this inexplicable evidence, Shipman mounted a desperate defense. He declared that Grundy had been a clandestine heroin addict, pointing to notes on his computer as proof. However, a subsequent forensic examination of his computer would punch a gaping hole in his alibi. It was discovered that these notes had been written after Grundy's death. The threads of Shipman's sinister tapestry continued to come undone when police uncovered yet another damning piece of evidence: a typewriter from Shipman's residence. This very typewriter was used to draft the counterfeit will that attempted to direct Grundy's wealth into his own pockets. The house of cards that Shipman had built was crashing down around him, and the full horror of his deeds was beginning to step into the light. Shipman was convicted for the murder of 15 of his patients. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars. His life would ultimately end in his prison cell in 2004, not at the hands of justice, but by his own hand. However, the chilling legacy of Harold Shipman does not end with the 15 lives he was officially charged with taking. In the grim aftermath of his conviction, it was speculated that his true number of victims far exceeded the official count. Based on the sheer volume of his patients who met their end under suspicious circumstances, some estimates suggest the tally to be in excess of 250. Harold Shipman's killing spree spanned a harrowing 23-year period from 1975 to 1998. The victims ranged in age from 41 to 93 at the time of their deaths. Each death played out in an eerily similar manner, a dark and dreadful routine that Shipman had perfected over the years. His weapon of choice was diamorphine. Administered in lethal doses, this drug would induce a peaceful, unsuspecting end to his patients' lives. The scenes of their deaths were always the same, within the safe confines of their own homes, and due to the old age of the victims, their families never suspected wrongdoing. Even to this day, the true motivations behind Harold Shipman's crimes remain controversial, with criminologists and psychologists providing differing interpretations. The most straightforward explanation would be financial gain. Shipman stood to profit substantially from the death of his final victim, having forged her will. However, when viewed in the broader context, this hypothesis begins to falter. Out of the over 200 suspected victims, the forgery of a will occurred only once, with his final victim. For all the preceding victims, there was no tangible financial gain to be had. This act of forgery coincided with the beginning of the police investigation into Shipman, suggesting a desperate attempt to amass resources before fleeing the country. To unearth the seed that might have germinated into Shipman's deadly compulsion, we must journey back to his adolescence. A close bond with his mother was cut short when she died while he was only 17. As her life ebbed away due to lung cancer, she was administered morphine to alleviate her pain, leading to a seemingly peaceful death. Shipman's method of murdering his victims bore a chilling resemblance to his mother's end, raising the possibility of a psychological drive fueling his actions. Coupled with his own personal struggle with painkiller addiction, Shipman may have been trapped in a warped psychological cycle, replaying the loss of his mother over and over again with each life he took. This theory is given further weight when considering that approximately 3/4 of his victims were women, perhaps mirroring his mother's image in his distorted psyche. Through the lens of this hypothesis, Shipman emerges as a profoundly disturbed individual, unable to reconcile with the loss of his mother. Driven by a perverse mix of grief, addiction, and a profoundly skewed perception of death, he may have enacted his mother's final days repeatedly, using his unsuspecting patients as stand-ins in the theatre of his twisted mind.